So ever since Keynes, so more than 100 years ago now, there was a belief by macroeconomists that when there was a movement in aggregate demand, say an increase in aggregate demand, in the total demand for goods, then the outcome was that output increased more or less in proportion and the price level didn't move much. So there were a lot of fluctuations due to demand. What I did in a paper with Nobihuro Kiyotaki was to identify the source of the problem, of a distortion which created this effect. And the answer we gave was that there was a price externality, in the sense that in an environment of imperfect competition, then price setters had very little incentive to change their prices in response to demand, but the result of each price setter not changing prices was that the price level didn't move, and this led the effect of demand to fall on output rather than on prices. I think the contribution was more to clarify the mechanism, but the paper was very influential. It was one of the first papers in the new Keynesian framework. So the initial model, the model with Kiyotaki, was much too simple to be able to analyze the complexity of the global financial crisis or the euro crisis later. But a lot of progress had been made since we had written our model. There was more than 10 years to do it, and we had much richer models which we could use to think about what the financial issues were, what the fiscal issues were. I myself worked more on the fiscal issues, namely how to reduce the large deficits which existed in a number of European countries, so as to minimize the pain. When you reduce a deficit, you either decrease spending or you increase taxes. This tends to decrease demand. This tends to lead to a recession. And that's costly, that's painful. People suffer, unemployment goes up. And so what I worked on at the time was how to achieve the fiscal consolidation which was needed without inflicting too much pain on these economies. So that's a very complex question at this point, because things have happened which we never thought would happen. But roughly what happened is that we've spent the last 80 years building a set of rules about good international behavior and good international trade behavior. And these rules have a very good reason for being there. Just to take an example, if there are no rules, then a country has an incentive to actually put tariffs on the goods that it imports, and it will gain something by doing so. So it's tempted to do it. The problem is that if it does it, and the other side responds by doing the same thing, then both are worse off. So this is a game in which if we let things happen, the outcome is quite bad. So the rules which have been created since Bretton Woods are basically such that, in general, we try to behave. Now, the Trump administration has decided not to play by these rules, and therefore the question is, what can Europe do? And the point that I think is important is that I think a lot of countries do not want to act like Trump. They want to continue to play by the old rules. And I think Europe can play a really important role in designing what I would call safe spaces, namely sets of countries which are willing to play by the old rules or better rules, but want to basically behave. And I think for macroeconomists like me at this point, it is the challenge is to think about how to design these rules for all the countries which are willing to behave. I've called this the coalitions of the willing, and I think that's what Europe should be thinking of about now.